Welcome to Dr Joe Unplugged. This podcast contains general information and is not in any way medical advice. Interesting research out of South America, and I'm going to quote, "The arteries of members of an indigenous community in the Bolivian Amazon, dubbed the world's healthiest, have remarkably low rates of coronary atherosclerosis compared with those of other populations. These arteries recently were found to be exceptionally elastic and to age more gradually, according to a study presented at the 2023 Annual Congress of the American Heart Association in Philadelphia." And this is from Medscape Today for those who want to go and possibly track down the study. Over the last decade, numerous studies in this community have documented a lower prevalence of arterial hypertension, which is high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, which is a condition where the heart beats quite erratically, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. So with all of that background, it's probably not that surprising that this population might also have lower rates of heart disease. Now, we touched before on the term coronary atherosclerosis. Some of you may be familiar with that. For those of you who aren't, like a lot of medical terms, it's jargon, it's Latin. Essentially, it means hardening and or narrowing of the arteries, artery, sclerosis, hardening, and is the first stage generally in a path that can lead to angina and heart disease. The question then may well arise, why should this population in Bolivia have lower rates of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and high blood pressure than other populations? What is it that they might be doing? Are they taking more tablets than the rest of us? Do they go to the doctor more often? Are they getting more scans done? Probably not surprisingly, the answer to all of that is no. They are, in the main, living in a way that is not dissimilar. And when I say living, perhaps more correctly, eating and acting in a way that's not that dissimilar to their ancestors. So they are active for most of the day. It's estimated that they're only inactive for 10% of the day. They eat what they can catch and what they can gather. And that includes fruit, honey, vegetables, local mammals, and fish that they catch in the river. They're not eating much processed food. They're not eating packaged food. They're not eating foods that come in a box with a label on it that says best before sometime in 2026 and with variably some tick stars or elephant stamps to guide them. They are doing what human beings have done for thousands of years. And it's not necessarily then a surprise that, as we know, rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes in particular, have been increasing since the early 80s when the low-fat dietary guidelines came in. But these people who are eating a diet which is comparable to what people probably ate up until the 1970s/early 80s, and they are physically active, have lower rates of heart disease. This is not rocket science. This is not difficult. What is important is not that we necessarily want to go and live in a rainforest. Look, some of you might like to, and might be nice for a while, but we live in the 21st century. You can't abandon necessarily living in cities and some of the conveniences and pluses and the minuses that can come with it. But we can, when we go to the supermarket, very, very much select what we put in our trolleys. We are not obligated to put in processed and packaged foods. We can buy meat, fish, chicken, vegetable proteins for those who are that way inclined. We can buy vegetables and fruits. We can buy it at the supermarket. Maybe it's better to support the local fresh market or grocer. We can buy nuts and berries. We can drink mainly water. Dear friend of mine passed away a few years ago. Apart from having a medical degree, had an economics degree, and he said, Joe, supermarkets are a bit like real estate. You can tell what goes well as to how much shelf space is devoted. And I'd say to all you, when you next go to the supermarket, wander around and just see how much real estate is devoted to soft drinks. You'll find it's close to an entire aisle. Probably does tell you something. There's no particular obligation for anybody to buy something from that aisle. You can if you want to have a soft drink on a Sunday or now and again. It's not the end of the world. But your main drink should be water. So ultimately, what we put into our bodies and how active or not active we are does influence our rates of obesity, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and heart disease. This is not saying that if you eat sensibly and exercise that it is impossible that you can ever have a heart attack. It's not a force field. There are no absolute guarantees or force fields in this world. But we can change the odds. If we are eating sensibly, if we're eating a little bit more like our ancestors did, if we eat foods that until not that long ago were moving around somewhere or growing somewhere, we drink mainly water, if we are more active and incorporate some movement and exercise into our daily lives, then we too can lower our rates of some of these illnesses. But more importantly, perhaps, we'll have more energy and we'll feel better. Thanks for listening to Dr. Joe Unplugged. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. You can also follow it on all the socials. There'll be new content uploaded each week.